So welcome to the Market Mentors podcast, David.
Thanks, Matt. It's good to be here. Thanks for asking me.
It's a pleasure. So before we dig into this topic, I'd love to know what your relationship is with writing.
It's, yes, possibly not an entirely functional and healthy relationship, depending on what day you catch it. I'm creative director and currently co-owner at Radix Communications. So we're specifically a B2B technology copywriting company. So we just do writing all the time. And as creative director, I'm ultimately responsible for that output. So, the head of copy and some of our consultant writers and things report into me. So I have a team of a dozen writers sitting in a warehouse in Cornwall. Well, they're all sitting here when we're in non-COVID times. Half of them are sitting here now. Writing marketing content for some of the biggest tech brands in the world.
Wow. So it's keeping you on your toes.
Oh, yes. Yeah, very, very much. It's an interesting life being surrounded by writers all day. You can, we just had a long conversation about where to put a particular comma, and you can kind of go down that particular sort of rabbit hole, which is the sort of thing where, that marketers would probably leave that stuff to us.
You guys are just nerding out on it.
Absolutely, yeah.
Fair play. So, to get to the sort of crux then, right now, why do you think it's so hard to sort of find and hire great B2B tech copywriters?
Yeah, it really, really is. And I think generally just the market for good written content has gone wild on one side of things. So two things happened in lockdown. Obviously, firstly, all of the face-to-face, all of the event marketing and that kind of stuff went on hiatus, went away. Obviously, there are kind of, online events and hybrid events and that kind of thing. But one of the things is that, that people had to find new ways to reach out and, frankly, new ways to spend their budget. And so there was a lot of content being written. And also, because the workplace has changed so much, all of those B2B technology companies that have the way that we work is what they do, they all had new things to say all at once. So none of the marketing companies, none of the agencies, none of the marketing teams could get enough writers to write all of this stuff. So that's one side of it. I think the other side of it is that at the same time, that big glut of content really put a premium on quality. So the writers who were really, really good ended up being in demand, and not just us, but the writers in-house organizations were overloaded. Most of the really good freelancers I know found themselves booked up months in advance as well. So I think it's the fact that they need quality, and all at once everybody needed everything writing. That may balance out now that events are beginning to open up and stuff. We don't know yet.
Yeah. Certainly from our perspective, we're seeing a huge rise in the need for not just copywriters, but actually content marketers as well. So whether or not there's a bigger push generally for SEO and so, or maybe organizations understanding the value of content, because you ultimately own that. Whereas going and trying to acquire customers through paid ads is getting more expensive. You've obviously got Apple coming in with updates that are going to affect privacy and tracking and things like that. So, maybe it's a sort of play around companies understanding the value in content generally to either educate, inspire, acquire customers and stuff.
I think so. And I think it's also to do with kind of the changing relationship and the changing nature of the B2B buying cycle as well. Even now that things are opening up a little bit, or seem to be, in the UK at least, there is less face-to-face stuff than there was. And so that business of building a rapport between the buyer and the brand the salesperson has less opportunity to do that. So you need more content for people to kind of get into and build that kind of trust.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And actually, I'm hearing people talk about, they've sort of coined it the dark social. So I know it's an interesting one, isn't it? So it's either dark social or the dark funnel, but it's one of the two. But it's actually what a buyer does. What you're talking about there. So if you're thinking about, okay, well, I need some workforce management software, the first thing you'll start to do is do your own research, and you'll do it without engaging with the businesses that you're talking to. And then when you start to engage, you're much further down the funnel because you've been on review sites, you've consumed content, you've been on a website, you've maybe looked at a sort of demo that's on a website. So, you've been doing all this research without speaking to that salesperson. So exactly what you're talking about there.
Yeah, and I think that's been a thing for a long time, as long as I've been involved in the industry. But I think COVID has really accelerated and underlined that stuff. But yeah, absolutely, that bit where people are doing their own research, and companies try to short circuit that. Like if you've ever had to put your phone number or your email address in to get some gated content, an ebook or a white paper or something, how quickly someone from their sales team will be in touch with you for engaging with that one touch point, and how annoying that is.
Well, yeah, you've gone into the MQL bucket.
Yep.
So in terms of copywriters themselves, then, I mean, how would you broadly define the different types of writers out there?
Oh, I think these days, a lot of people have to do a lot of jobs and cover a lot of bases. I think back in the past, there were very distinct types, and sort of the most popular piece of content on our website of all time, is outlining these. The creative copywriter, the brand journalist, the digital writer, the response writer. But now, well, everything is digital, give or take. So everyone's a digital writer. Everyone kind of has to understand how that stuff works. Most of the content that you need needs to be engaging, informative, educating. So there's an element of the brand journalist in there. So you do get people that have different specialities. You do get people that are particularly good visually. So they're great on things like infographics or things like video scripts, because if you write a voiceover script, a really good one, it works in tandem with the pictures. It doesn't just repeat everything that you see on the screen. You work out what you show and what you tell. Yeah. And so being a writer that can have that in their mind, can have a specialism there. Some people like really long format, sort of explainer type things. And some people like, really short. Again, there are still emails and banners and paid social and stuff getting written. That all still happens, but increasingly we look to our writers to cover all the bases now.
Yeah, and I think I reckon that the first step then for a business is to hire, maybe rather than going sort of full time from the off, then is perhaps to hire a freelancer or an agency then to sort of support with their copywriting. In that situation, then, what sort of tips would you give that company when they're creating a brief then to engage that copywriter or that agency?
I think what copywriters look for in a brief will kind of change. Will vary from project to project and from writer to writer. But there's a number of things that will help. If you can kind of give them an idea of who the audience is, who they are, what they care about, or where you can find these people hanging out online. Like if I can watch an interview with a customer or with a prospective customer, or see the discussions that they're having online, it gives me an idea of what they care about and the language that they use. So some stuff on that would be really, really helpful. The things that you would think would be really obvious that you don't always see in a brief, what the objectives are, where it's going to be published, what you're going to do with it visually, and then kind of an idea of voice and tone. So an idea of emotionally how you want people to feel about this, where your brand fits in the market, whether you are the big authoritative player, whether you are the safe pair of hands, whether you are, the upstart who challenges everything, whether you're that funky brand that swears a lot, whatever. And sometimes that can just be as simple as finding some examples out in the world from not competitors necessarily, but from other equivalent industries or markets, and kind of saying, we kind of like it to sound a bit like this, and that kind of stuff. But really, we do have a written form that we send out to people for a brief, but it's always better to use that as a starting point for a conversation. What you shouldn't do is send off your email and go, there you go, copywriter, there's the stuff. And then the other thing is make sure it's relevant. Like, we get people that send us everything their brand has published ever. And you get things that are like, do you want me to charge you for 2 days to read all of this?
They think they're being helpful.
They do. And sometimes it's helpful, but a bit of curating and a bit of thinking about what they need to know is useful. But we find like a telephone conversation, or these days, a Zoom, can really help us tease that stuff out. The other thing that will always help a writer as well, depending on what you're writing for the content, is if we can have access to the subject matter expert, then that's always great. The thing that we love, I can't speak for anyone else, but for Radix, the thing that we love as copywriters is when we get to talk to someone really clever and then translate that for the audience. Find out what they know and then make it sound like them, but being more engaging and interesting.
Yeah, because I guess that is the hard bit, especially for you guys, because you're working across lots of different industries. To be that subject expert across all them is actually impossible and not necessary. The organizations have got the knowledge, like you said, sort of getting access to that. And from a sort of brand and tone perspective, is that sort of more thinking about, I'm thinking of the companies that perhaps don't have that necessarily established. Is that more about how your customers talk then? Is that how you should approach that kind of stuff? Or is it more about actually how you want to be perceived?
It's a bit of both. So you absolutely need to understand the language that your customers use, because you have to be taken seriously in the market. So that is both in terms of kind of the vocabulary and in terms of what's important and what's not important, and what they already know and what they don't already know. You'd only write into the automotive industry and going, so we're going to talk about the construction of a car, which is a vehicle with a wheel at each corner. You've
lost them then.
It's working out what they know already, so you're not already telling them what they know, and that kind of thing. But absolutely, it's pitching on the level of the audience. But then also that's in kind of terms of like the vocabulary that you use. And then the voice and tone, it's a little bit about what your relationship to the audience is. Are you peer-to-peer? Are you supporting and helping them as the hero? Are you the big authoritative? You must do it like this, or whatever. It's kind of about the relationship between the two.
And has it become a bit more conversational then? Are you noticing that sort of, I think of B2B being quite stiff and corporate years gone by. These times I'm seeing sentences start with an and things like that. There's probably a term for that. I wouldn't know that. I mean,
it's starting a sentence with a conjunction.
That's the one, the conjunction.
We had a whole blog, a whole podcast about that.
Oh, brilliant.
Just recently. I would say it's been, again, it's what's appropriate for the brand. And it's been maybe, 5 or 10 years that people, some brands are much warmer, more approachable sounding, more conversation, more direct. I think that people are also understanding the importance of readability. So they might be looking at things like a flesh reading ease score or something like that, just to check that their stuff is not too difficult. It's not just going to take forever and be an absolute pain to read. But it absolutely needs to be appropriate. And there are some industries where that is absolutely not happening. Like, so the other year I did some stuff for the big kind of systems integrator consultancies, and I reviewed 50 pieces of content. And they were scoring, percentage. Flesh reading ease is more or less a percentage. And there were pieces there in single figure scores. So like incredibly hard to read.
Wow.
Because there are organizations that try to make their language more complicated as a way of showing off.
This is how important I am.
And I think in most B2B markets, if you can make your stuff reasonably readable, that's going to differentiate you from quite a lot of your competitors straight away. So there is some movement there, but I wouldn't say it's necessarily there's like a trend or that there's a new thing or anything. There was a bit of a trend for kind of everyone being very brash sort of 5 years ago. Everyone was swearing and it was kick ass this and supercharge that, and thankfully that's calmed down a bit now.
Well, there is a marketing agency, is it Velocity? And and I think they were sort of calling their marketing something, not bullshit. I don't know. They're using the word bullshit a lot, I remember. So it's one way of standing out, isn't it, I guess?
There's still a bit of that. And, when you go to, I think it's still when you go to their email newsletter.
That's the one.
It's very good, by the way. It just like opt into our crap.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
they're very straight talking, and I think that was part of what really began to shake the market up. So Doug Kessler, their creative director, wrote a piece called, off the top of my head, I think it's called "Crap: Why the Biggest Problem to Content Marketing is Content Marketing," or something like that. But that was a while ago. That was more than 5 years ago now. Maybe in my mind, I'm thinking it was 2013, 2014, but it was a while back. Yeah. But that at the time, when everything was B2B and was very buttoned down, to see a thing with the headline "crap" was really was it was shaking it up. And on the back of that, in B2B content marketing in general and copywriting, in particular, Doug's become a bit of a god of the industry just for being that kind of straight talking and stuff.
I've heard it coined as radical candor or something like that.
Oh, yes.
Was that him? I can't remember if it was him, but I remember watching a video of him doing that. And it kind of makes sense, doesn't it? Because we all sometimes feel like we are marketed to a bit too much, and to sort of say, and I think sort of Hertz did it years back, but to be that sort of so honest. We want to be number one rather than we are the best.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a lot to be said for that. I mean, in B2B, but in all markets. I was at I have the honor, actually, it's a real treat that I get to compare the UK's National Copywriting Conference every year.
Oh, cool.
And just a lot of the advice that people were sharing, and in all of the the keynotes and the sessions and things, were it came down to, if you want to stand out, be more honest. That can be more direct, so that you don't hide what you're saying in language that's too obtuse. And some of it is working out who should not be your customer. And acknowledge some of your drawbacks and that kind of stuff that people are really scared of, and I think marketers do understand, but I think that sometimes it's difficult to get stakeholders, to get like product managers and things to go along with. But yeah, that kind of insane honesty approach. I've actually seen, funny enough, speaking about that, I have actually seen a presentation some years ago that the deck that Velocity used when they were pitching to a really big client.
Yeah.
And it genuinely, it started with, here are all the reasons you would be insane to hire us.
I like it.
And it was like, I love it. And I hope they don't mind me saying that. I'm sure that that's fine, given that they're honest about everything.
If that doesn't get someone's attention.
It's great, but yeah, I think that they kind of broached that, way of doing things. And I think that, a lot of people have learned from them since. So that, a lot of those practices are becoming a bit broader in the market now.
Good stuff. So going back to our sort of our scenario, if you like, we've sort of created the brief then to hire somebody. Mm-hmm. How do you generally sort of structure the hiring process then for writers?
Well, for us, it is phenomenally difficult to hire an experienced writer,
right?
An experienced B2B tech writer, because they're so niche. And to be perfectly honest, if they're good, they're already earning way more as a freelancer than we could afford to pay them.
It's fine.
Because we have an office and we have overheads and paid holiday and all of these things. And of course there are reasons to come and work for someone like us. So we've actually just gone employee owned. So everybody here gets a stake of the business on their behalf, and you get to work with a team, which, writing can be very solitary, and you get your evenings and weekends off and all of those other things, like we actually stop at 5:30 and all of these things that you don't get as a freelancer. But that economic argument is very hard, but sometimes, you can get tired of that treadmill and you can kind of find those people. But to be honest, what we tend to do these days is look for people with a real talent for writing. And, maybe they're in a different kind of writing career, or maybe they are relatively new. We're quite lucky here because we're close to Falmouth. So we've got the university, all the writing courses, the professional writing, creative writing. And we look for people who are geeks with a flair for writing. People that can take a really gnarly, tricky subject, whatever that is, and explain it to you really clearly and write really well. Like, if you can get that stuff, then you can train them in B2B tech. You can, because they have the natural curiosity, you can train them in B2B tech, and you can train them in content marketing and, the process and where the thing they're writing fits into the bigger picture. It takes a long time. I mean, for us to have a writer really established with us takes maybe 5 years on average.
Wow.
But we have to invest that, because that's where we get our best writers, by and large. Very few of us here. I had a career in copywriting and B2B tech copywriting before I worked at Radix, but very few of us do. But they kind of come in. So that's sort of how we do it. We hire for the talent, skills, personality, the right character, and then we kind of invest a lot in kind of training, internal review process. So experienced writers are always reviewing less experienced writers' work and giving them feedback every day for years and years and years to get them really good. So it is really hard, unless you have loads of money burning a hole in your pocket. But then I think people a lot of the time, they like the freedom of the freelance thing. So it is hard to train people from there.
Yeah. Well,
so we'll do a recruitment thing where we've got We ask for samples of their work. Now, obviously, they might not have a relevant portfolio, but normally, if someone's really, really into writing and they're a nerd, they'll have and I say that, as a nerd myself and full of love for my colleagues. But if they're really, really into writing and they're a nerd, they'll have a portfolio of something that they're writing about. So the people here have had previous lives as bloggers, as video games journalists, poets, they'll have something. And so we kind of look at that portfolio. So much of it is about the covering letter.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
By the time I get to the CV, I'm really just looking for confirmation.
Yeah.
Because end of the day, their job, part of it is going to be writing things like an email, extracting the most relevant information, thinking about what the audience wants and presenting that to them. So if you can write a brilliant covering letter, I'm already like, okay, this is someone that we need to interview.
Yeah.
It's all about the covering letter, and we might put in in the process, we'll put in a bit of a writing test to see how they get on with, weird subjects and if that they can kind of write about something really technical in a way that's really easy, really clear, and that kind of thing. But there's all sorts of that process. The other way that we recruit people is we do have a paid internship, or at least we do when COVID hasn't closed the office. So we'll take on an intern and give them paid work experience.
Yeah.
And then some of those people go on to be, we kind of go, this person's really good. Sometimes we find diamonds that way as well.
Yeah. Well, what makes me smile sometimes is when you see copywriting roles or adverts or job description, and it says at the bottom underneath the requirements, must have a degree in English.
Yeah.
As if you're not doing English, you're not writing, whereas, if you're looking at a history degree, crikey, there's a hell of a, there are so many subjects out there that require a hell of a lot of writing. People just get so laser focused on somebody having an English degree.
Yeah, it's absolutely. I mean, my early steps in copywriting were under a company called the John Knowles Company, and John Knowles, who's a bit of a legend of kind of the marketing scene in sort of materials handling and forklift trucks and things like that. And John's, I believe, a psychology graduate. And the senior copywriter there at the time, Mark Nicholson, was a zoologist by training. Yeah. Had actually been the zoology expert talking about newts by the pond in the Blue Peter Garden in a former life. I had gold Blue Peter badge and everything. So a lot of it is about, particularly in B2B, it is about being able to get really enthusiastic and expansive about really arcane, weird subjects. People think that being, knowing your way around a set of grammar, knowing your way around grammar rules, knowing your way around a vocabulary, tenses, all of that stuff is really important to cover. But we tend to think that there's a hierarchy of kind of 5 copywriting competencies in B2B, and that bit about being able to your grammar and all of that stuff is like that's the basic level of the 5. Right. Yeah. You need it, but it's not enough on its own.
Wow. How much emphasis do you put on the sort of softer skills? Because as you well know, in sort of B2B, you are interacting with lots of different people, aren't you? You could be, as you mentioned earlier, interviewing a subject matter expert. You could be working with the sales team. You could be working with the rest of the marketing team. So actually having those personal skills are important as well. How much sort of emphasis do you tend to put on that?
It's quite hard to find people that already have that. I mean, they need a level of confidence. But we do a lot of work on training it, because it is it's interviewing skills. It's a little bit about being able to think on your feet, being able to follow where someone's going and then ask them the right questions. Because we're never going to know as much as the experts, but we do need to pitch the questions at a level where we can explain things to an audience that knows less than them, but also where they don't feel like they're wasting their time.
Yeah.
And absolutely, like being able to wrangle clients and stuff is important. And being able to control a call with a stakeholder that's gone off way, way off topic, and they've disappeared off over the hill on some wild tangent. Sometimes you can get them back, sometimes you can't. Sometimes you just have to hold on to the coattails. But yeah, it's really important, to be able to do that stuff. That what we have here is we have a very clear banding as people progress through, grades of junior copywriter, content lead, senior copywriter. And those skills they're not really something we look for at a junior level. We start to train them in. So by the time they're at kind of a midweight copywriter level, they can start to really kind of run those calls on their own. But we'll have people coming in as a shadow or as a second on the call, and then as they get more confident, we'll ask them to pitch in a couple of questions. Then they'll lead the call with a more experienced writer in case things go awry, who might also pitch in things they've forgotten. Yeah. And so we phase it in like learning any skill.
Yeah, same as you would train a salesperson, I guess, exactly the same. So so let's imagine we've got our copywriter in place then. I mean, how would you recommend someone sort of work with them to get the most from them? And obviously you talked a little bit about the briefing earlier.
I think that, a lot of it is about helping them to understand your market, helping them to understand your customer. I think, and some of it's about the jobs that you give them, like that enable them to learn and develop and get under the skin of it. So clients where I get to write case studies for them, I get to find out very quickly what their customers actually care about and to and how they talk about those things. Every case study I write makes me a better writer for that brand, for that customer, that client, because I get to find out I get to talk to the people that I'm writing to, because your next customer looks like the before picture and the before and after that is a case study, right? Yeah. And so I get, and I get to ask those questions that you can't really accurately ask a marketer, like, okay, why did they buy that? What difference did that make to you? Yeah. What was the moment that you knew something needed to change? How do you actually feel about this? Because it's never what the marketer thinks it is. So often it's, oh yeah, I like the salesperson. Oh, is it this new product? And oh, did you like the triple widget flangulator? And they'll go, no, Pamela recommended it, and I trust her.
Brilliant.
And get to find out a bit about that decision-making process and things. So anything you can do that gives your writer that insight will really help. So it could be brief them on case studies and get them to interview, talk to your customers directly, or maybe it's that you, that if you can't do that, then there are recordings that they can listen to. One of the things that I did, and again, if it's a freelance writer, might not be appropriate, but one of the things that I did that really helped when I was young is that I went and worked on an exhibition stand for one of my clients, not doing all of the sales and the conversations, but because I'd written all of the materials. So I knew which information was in which document and that kind of thing. So if they went, oh, have you got anything about XYZ? I'll be like, yes, we have got something on that. So I was like running support on the stand. But as a result of that, I was overhearing all the sales conversations and all the language that people use. So anything that you can do that, brings the writer closer to the audience. Also putting them in touch with your salespeople, because your salespeople, marketing team, your product marketing team will know why things have been built a certain way, why they've been designed a certain way, what they feel your messaging ought to say.
Yeah.
And that's all fine, but the salespeople will know what works. The salespeople will know, okay, this is the bit that when I say it, the lights go on behind someone's eyes. And knowing that stuff's great as well. So a little bit of getting them close to sales and a lot of getting them close to your customer.
Perfect. And when they're sort of producing the content, then they're writing the pieces, whatever you need, actually produce then, how would you typically sort of review and quality check that sort of work?
So internally at Radix, we do a lot of work around making that that process really repeatable and really objective, because the easiest thing when you're reviewing something, the easiest mistake to fall into is to review something on the basis of I wouldn't have written it that way, rather than does this fulfill the criteria, yes or no? Because you're not writing for yourself, you're writing for another audience. And so we have a checklist. We're actually revising it at the moment, but I'm happy to share it with you, and you kind of share the hyperlink with your audience. But we actually have a 15, 16-point checklist of everything that we go through, like yes, no questions about, everything from the basic stuff like, are the facts correct and are there typos in it, right up through to, is there voice and tone? Is it enjoyable to read? Is it going to prompt people to take action? Is the structure clear? All of those things. So having a checklist is really helpful. I think for the marketers that are listening, that also, I think, helps to direct when you're sending stuff out to stakeholders sometimes who might want to rewrite everything and believe that you can't start a sentence with and or but, and all of those things. Just kind of limit the areas that they are the areas of expertise where they're reviewing. Yeah. And sometimes the insight they give you is really helpful. So I think that's useful. One of the other things that we do here is for anything that's like a long piece of content, so either like a really long blog post, ebook, white paper, anything that's going to take us a while to write, we will generally speaking, we'll write an outline first, just kind of bit of working title, bit of an intro, bullet points, just, okay, we're going to cover these things in this order. These are the information that we're going to, bits of information that we're going to use. These are the sources we're going to reference. These are the points we're going to make. So that if we've got it badly wrong, we don't have so far to row back. Because if you're looking at, a 3,000-word document, and the writer has fundamentally misunderstood one of the key points, that's a lot of rework and everything gets delayed. So, what we normally do, we do this kind of skeleton outline first, get approval or make changes based on that, so that we know that when the final draft comes, we are at least in the right ballpark. Yeah,
I think that's a good idea. I think that's and we'll share that sort of chat-list if you don't mind us doing that.
Don't mind at all.
Really
very happy for people to steal it. What I would say is it's the one that we use internally.
Yeah.
So there are things there, but does it reflect the client's voice and tone and that kind of thing? So obviously there are bits that you would need as a marketer, to adapt for your own purposes. But it gives you an idea. So we asked 3 questions about accuracy. So we had these 5 skills that I mentioned. We asked 3 questions about accuracy, 3 about clarity, 3 about authority, 3 about empathy, and 3 about what we call wizardry, because we needed a word that ended in Y. And we just had literally these yes/no questions, and we make sure that everything scores, as far as possible with the brief that we've got, everything scores 15 out of 15, or with the new question that we've got 16 out of 16 before it leaves the office and goes over to the client. As far as possible, you can't do everything in every brief, but as far as possible, we do that.
Well, that sounds awesome. We'll definitely share that. Last question then, David. Where do you recommend somebody to go if they want to learn more about writing, becoming a better writer, all this kind of stuff?
Oh, there's a lot of places. I think that pro copywriters have a lot of resources. About a lot of it is about work, success as a freelancer, but also about working as a writer and different approaches and things. They have loads of training, loads of materials, and it's peanuts to join. It's really good value, and they do the copywriting conference as well, which is where you get a really good cross section of speakers and that kind of. Plus, just to meet and talk to other writers. To be honest, we share as much stuff as we can on the Radix blog. So people are very welcome to read our blog, sign up for the email newsletter updates. That stuff's great. Again, very focused about B2B writing, B2B content marketing. And if people want kind of a more structured thing, we do open training sessions through B2B marketing. Yep. So there are seats available for people to buy, which is on a course which is way cheaper than hiring me to come and spend a day in your office. Much as I'd like to do that, I think that's great. And then there are loads of really good books. As you said, I'm looking around behind me to see if we've got any here. But there's good books by Tom Albright and John Espirian, Anne Handley. Writers like to write, so there's loads of books about writing, and a lot of them are really good.
I can imagine. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. Thanks very much for giving up your time. Thanks very much for sharing your knowledge. No, it's an absolute pleasure. Always happy to to chat about writing. It saves me from doing any. Perfect. Thank you, David.
All right. Thank you.